Okay, we're going to try to brush upon knowledge in sacred geometry. And believe me, this gives me kind of a headache to try to put together for somebody. And I've already made 6 videos that aren't ready to put out, and it looks like I need to make at least a couple more. So once you see the whole thing, you'll get the idea. And that's terrible. But that seems to be what it takes. Whenever you're learning geometry, it's not something you can go in there in an hour after lunch, have it. You might get a new theorem or something like that, but you'd have to know what's going on beforehand and things like that, and be in the Kool-Aid, as to say, wouldn't you? Well, different people grow up differently in different places and have different teachers and go through different times whenever they grow up. And indeed, you could probably see kids that were just 3 or 4 grades below or above you were different than your generation somewhat. I noticed it going through the 80s at the end of my high school and coming into college. And I'm not trying to put down anybody in any way, shape, or form, but more explaining that people sometimes aren't subjected to certain things, and sometimes it becomes a missing puzzle. Other people would say this and algebra and things like that is nothing that needs to even really be known. And I can understand that you can live your whole life with sacred geometry surrounding you your entire existence, and not even know that it exists and that people had noticed it thousands and thousands of years ago. But somehow, whenever I plug that into my equation, it means so much more. And if I lose that piece of the puzzle, everything fades just a little bit. And it's like, you know, without this doesn't seem as possible or feasible. And of course, if that doesn't seem feasible, then things later wouldn't have happened that way, and therefore we wouldn't be here now in the existence that we currently live in. If you follow me, I hope you do. I find sometimes in my videos I go back and look at them, and people don't want to see their own work or whatever. I go back and I'll say I say and things, and there's a lot of times where I wish they had the old editor they used to have here, because I could do some little 14-second plug-in instead of go and things and just go on. But I would start the little clip with like blah 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 and this and that, and this is how you apply it, and so, and then click, and then you just plug it in and re-release it. In fact, watch my stuff and be able to do it. I like to be able to go somewhat raw and straightforward, but when you get to a point like this and things, you need some type of references. So again, before we ever get anything, I'm going to talk my ass off about stuff. For if you look here, it just kind of looks like scribbles and bobbles and no telling what the hell's going on. And hey, if you're old school, you remember Spirograph, and a lot of these looks like things that you made with Spirograph. And those that have been looking around probably notice that there's this bigger spiral that comes in and around like that, and is reminiscent of a nautilus type shell. Other people, perhaps women more, might recognize that some of these shapes look like gemstones somewhat. Some of these look like the tops of gemstones here, and especially there, for these are common gem cuts that one would do. And it becomes the common facets that make light portray back towards someone. And ironically, it's the way the bottom is cut that you really don't notice that flashes the light around that's coming in from the top and brings it back out at you. And this we notice is sparkling or scintillating. Now we look back at old jewelry and stuff like that people have, and they have polished stones, but they're not cut. But after a period in time, they become cut, and they're cut with sacred geometry. And to tell you, whenever I was a kid, that everything surrounded me, and there were moments where I was like, "Oh my God, it's all around me," and it freak you out somewhat. Um, give you an example. When we were first studying this, Pythagoras, and I started studying a little bit of Greek before I even tried to study Greek, but just like, what do these words mean and stuff like that, and root words and stuff like that, and got a book of that. And pith is actually the center of a date palm type tree, and these piths are what they used as the strengthening point to make most ropes with if they didn't use hemp. And it said that, and I'm a kid about the hippie age coming out of 60s and stuff, and I know what that is. But I also know that, so they're saying it's the heart of a tree, and I just read about how those trees are sacred to all these people and stuff, and there was this other thing about other trees and sacred, and the Egyptians loved sycamores and yew trees and had statues made. And what is all this? I heard yew trees have to do with elves and blah blah blah, and of course a never-ending array of questions abounded, and I tried to get some of them answered. And meanwhile, I'm studying ancient cultures, but I'm playing a game about that. That's real cool, called Dungeons and Dragons, and a lot of people don't know, but all the folklore of old and all this stuff led to these ideas that you have, from whether or not you're trying to do something about witches and warlocks and werewolves and vampires, or you're going back to things and fighting Medusa and recreating things of like that, or tales of old, and just made up different things off of it. But they're still utilizing this, and while we're playing that game, we're using dice that look a lot like these shapes because they use the same amount of surfaces that are given, and each one of those is based on sacred geometry, and that also is a percentage chance, i.e. one simple to explain is a six-sided dice. So you have a 1 in 6 chance of doing something, or rolling a 6, or rolling a 1, or some special number, right? And that'd be a rare event. How rare is it? Well, it's 16.66%. Now, there's that 666 type number come at you, but it comes at you in a lot of ways, and it correlates with the sun and movements and measurements. All kinds of things go along with this. So let's just get into this before I waste time talking. But think of that picture there as we refer to things a few more times in this. Sacred geometry, unlocking the secret structures of the universe. Cambridge English Dictionary defines geometry as the area of mathematics relating to the study of space and the relationships between points, lines, curves, and surfaces. This definition fits it nicely with the academic study of geometry, which is based on rationalism. Okay? But to interject even here, so while I was studying this and starting to figure out some things, this was during the coming of age and kids partying and alternate things and such, but also at the same time I'm listening to certain albums, and I've talked many times before how the symbolism is on album covers, and people, whenever we used to have albums, look up what an album is if you're young, but they used to have album covers with all kinds of stuff, and you thought that was neat. Quite often it was a double album cover with an inside, or the sleeve inserts would have all the words on them with pictures and things like that. It was pretty damn neat, and they try to cram that in a little CD thing now, and it's a little bit different experience, for you can't put your albums up on the wall, things like that you used to be able to do, and it was almost like a poster, but different. And it also had a symbology with it, like Dark Side of the Moon. And I remember taking a couple of them and sticking them together so the light would come in and turn into a rainbow into light, back out. Anyhow, but geometry in its essence wasn't what they even give you. For geo, Gaia, key is the earth, and metry is to measure something. And so it's actually means to measure the earth. Measurements of all of earth. We'll get into a point where that's figured out, and the measurement and the size of earth and how they used geometry to do so, and that would be sacred because you figured out all the stuff. And who had all this stuff? Well, these scribes and priests and stuff going on, and here it's hooked up with religion and planets. Back at that picture we were looking at first, sure it looks like gemstones and things. Let's take a step back up. Man, I can't even get a paragraph, can I? For if we look at these, it might look like sugar crystals and stuff, or things that you've seen whenever you're looking through a microscope. And someone might think of atoms and how they work and they look. But you might think of something much bigger than yourself all of a sudden and vastly large, and it actually displays the way planets can get laid out. And there are trajectories. I can notice here that there is this square with this cutoff, or this square with this cutoff, or the square with a cutoff, and it's twisting its way up. Here's a variation of that same situation, but different. That's in front of it. But different because it's laying out on a plane slightly, or they drew it a little different. One wonders how long people have been taking something that looks like a compass, like this, and spinning around and making these shapes. And this is nothing. For once they started alchemy, if you will, they started putting these things and overlapping the shapes. For right here, we don't see a Vesica Pisces at all. But if you were to take this shape right here and put two of them right next to each other, where they come together and form that canoe shape, if you will, in the middle of it, that is the Vesica Pisces and the shaping of it. So you don't see all the gemstones in the way people cut them here, and you go, well, there is that long football-shaped cut. Well, I'll be damned, isn't that a Vesica Pisces? And they used that shape of ring to signify certain things. And so a lot of these things are just all trapped in when you can use them. And I could just sit and spit out a bunch of information real quick to you, and a lot of people like to do that when they do sacred geometry and talk about an inch versus a foot versus a mile and how you figure that out, and here's the pyramid, and here's the sun, the moon, and ta-da! And that's a great magic show, and I could do a little dance for you if you want to, but that's kinda, oh man, that's it's a nothing burger. Let's just go with that. So it's based on rationalism, aspect ratios, percentages, all these things go into it. Thoughts come from this. People have a rational mind, and percentages of thoughts give you an idea on what you might do, leading to another thought down a road, down a road, down a road. It works whenever you get your mind hooked up right. It's just there. It's logic. It's like Spock. So it's all in your face, right? Well, they talk about points on a curve and surfaces and stuff. When I was a kid, there was that album Points on a Curve. It had Dance All Days in it and a few others. And it was cool because they started sampling music and making a weird, geared music and stuff. But always there's something around. So there's Pythagoras and Pyth, and what we know what that is, and what's Hagor. Well, Hagor can be Hathor, and it can also be Hagar. And so I look up what's Hagar supposed to be, and of course we all know that that's a, well, some people might remember a comic strip that might be in the news, or in the newspaper. And you're supposed to be some Viking go dumb kind of situation, but whenever you study out what that really was, It's not anything like that. When we look at the ancient Celts and the people that were over there and the knowledge that they might have had, which is all burned away like the Library of Alexandria, we wonder what the hell we were missing. And it's taken us a couple of thousand years to get kind of back where we were. But when we say kind of back where we were, we're not there, because they were at the edge of burgeoning, and we're learning this stuff as we have already gotten past in it in our feeling to need to know it. You know, it's when you go to school, you don't think you're using algebra, but then you say, well, it takes 4/4. Okay, what's that? That's $1. That's actually algebra. What? Well, it takes X. What's X? Quarters. 25 cents, that's a percentage too. See how this works together, and then it takes 4 of them, and 4x equals, how much do you need? I need $1 or 10 or 100 of those. Each one of those is 25, and it's just that simple. But there, so much can come from that, and it's math. Math is boring to some people, and then some people it just gets past them real quick. But a lot of this is pretty easy to see if you have a good instructor. And I'm not a math instructor, more or less somebody that can teach you sacred geometry. So I can only show you relationships and things that I understand out of it, things that I found, and how weird that it looks like it comes from a time before time. And I used to talk about this and make mentions of it in videos and tell you it comes from way back when, and there was no verification for that. They found Göbekli Tepe, and I said, watch, they're going to find it and everything. Well, already there's circles and stuff, and you know that works with Stonehenge and da-da-da. So tell me it doesn't go along with that, and that isn't 3 times the age, and they're already still doing it. And we've found recently that they are. I've got another video coming out about that too, but I'm waiting for a couple of guys that are real good about it to come out with their own video, because they do the testing to the inch, to the this, to the that, and everything, and then come out of it, put it on a computer, and then there they can really tell. And that computer program works with their star program, and lo and behold, they can see what everything was pointing at everything. They were the ones that took it from 8 linear projections to 12. Well, that group of people, then the people that come from that actually have taken it to the new 32 that comes out of it, and so on. And like, what is this? Oh, it works up with the sun and the moon and everything else. Oh, here's a firecracker, gonna throw it out in the middle of the street. So the Temple of Solomon, it's a temple of the sun and the moon. Okay, well, how far does that go back, and what's that go with? Those stone circles that we talk about are measuring what the sun and the moon does. That's the ancient temples of the Sol, solar, sun, and Mon, moon, as in Monday. And we still have that. So you start off the week worshiping the sun and the moon. You're still worshiping Solomon. That's for another video, guys. There's your firecracker. Let's continue here. I got that coming out in a video, and I guess it won't pop so big when I'm doing that. I must surround it with other cute little fireworks, huh? It has been argued, however, that there is an opposite but complementary side to this field of study of geometry. According to this view, geometry has an intuitive side to it, and certain geometrical shapes and proportion contain sacred meanings, like percentages, the intuitive side, all kinds of things. This belief may be considered to be the basis of sacred geometry. The concept and application of sacred geometry can be found in many civilizations around the world. But there is a certain people who found this existed in nature and in the sky above, and in the smallest thing they could see at the time to the largest. And then they started finding out these ratios. And odd thing is, when we start to look at ancient buildings and all the things that go with it, they were using this number, much like bees build a beehive with sacred chambers that look like a hexagon, all together just right so they can do their thing just right. These people were making sure they're doing their thing just right. And although it looks like an aberration of nature to make a house and this, that, and the other, or these circles, It is their representation, just like any other animal might do something, then leave their mark upon the earth. For once these people became the master of beasts and the controller of all, in the Bible it tells you that once they eat this apple and they do all this thing, and a woman grows from a rib and eats from a magic tree because the talking snake told her to, that if they ate from the magic tree, they were to be as gods upon the earth. Most people scuff that over with a whole lot of else that goes on there, but yeah, these people, and they've heralded civilization. It's amazing. We're going to look about something about that in just one aspect and piece of the puzzle of the cool things that were brought by them. Ancient geometry and the development of geometry in different cultures. It's commonly believed that geometry began as a practical subject and came into being as a result of everyday concerns. The earliest practitioners of geometry developed a set of rules to calculate lengths, areas, volumes. Many of these, however, were crude approximations and were based on trial and error. According to Herodotus, geometry was established by ancient Egyptians. This is supported by written evidence from Egypt itself, where we see them using it. But nevertheless, the ancient Mesopotamians are also known to have practiced geometry, as did the ancient Chinese and people of India. So a lot of people had this. Funny that he mentions those exact cultures, for I've made a video recently and a bunch of them in the past that show Mesopotamian type people and what we know as Sumerians had a definite connection with the Egyptians from the Wayback Machine, and in fact it looks like they had a lot more to do with them. Gebel Arak knife's the one that's fixing to come out, but also we definitely know that the Tarim Basin people and the pyramids built there, and that has to do with the people that were there at the time, and so does India, and I can't say any more about that for some reason. So here we look at a script, maybe like something that would have been one of the things that you would find and look over that was some knowledge left by somebody in ancient Alexandria, or everybody says everything was there. If you look into it, there was a lot of different libraries, and slowly but surely they got burnt over time. And then of course this stuff is flammable and and some people get real pissed off and want to burn it all and then go stupid, like to justify their idiocy. But that's another statement. You look here and it's broken down in sections, and what you wouldn't realize is that this is a cross. It's not a cross, is it? Well, yeah, it's a cross. See, this is a box right here. And if we were to take and fold up these corners and then fold this up over and over the top, it makes a cube. But if we were to fold that differently, we would have from the middle, and it would flop out one on one side, out one on another, out one on the top, and then two on the bottom. Again, making a fold up, fold up, fold up cube. But then there's this extra piece. What is that? Well, is there a flat plane on the bottom or the top? Which one are we taking that for? So representations are everywhere, but Euclid is considered being the father of geometry, elements and fragments of which are shown here, one of the most influential works in history of mathematics. So this was things that got everybody going, but they're even going to tell you here that it goes way back, and I tell you it goes way back farther than that. And this is actually not talking about necessarily the exact quotient numbers of sacred geometry, but how far back it goes and what its elements are. Around the 6th century BC, the Greeks got themselves involved in geometry, transforming from practical subject into an abstract one based on generalizations. It's also from the Greeks that this branch of mathematics obtained its name. It is a combination of two words, geo, meaning earth, and metron, meaning measure. Although there were many Greek and Roman thinkers who contributed to the subject, none of them had a greater impact than Euclid, who is often considered to be the father of geometry. Euclidean, everybody knows about that. Euclid lived in Alexandria between the 4th and 3rd BC centuries, and is best known for his elements. And you think of the elements and how atoms are built and things like that. And tell you, at a time before time, in a different world altogether, almost the way we look back on it, this was the theory of everything. Yeah, we think of E equals mc squared and everything. Oh, that just is the power and kinetic potential, da, 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 da. And it really isn't everything. In fact, he said himself it wasn't the theory of everything. But for people that knew all this other stuff, it seemed to help out in what they know. Now everybody's searching for a sacred G. What's that? That's gravity. Gravitas. Graviton. What is that? What gives weight to things? What does this? What does that? Why is gold so heavy? Still on that. But then you also have gold is Ag as a symbol, the element chart. So then you have pith, and then you have ag, the golden center of things. Do you think somebody named their kid that? Or was this guy's name Jeff, and they put these names on him like they did to a lot of people back then? What are your thoughts? All those Greeks, their names come from their deeds, actually, such as Archimedes. This treatise on the elements is considered to be one of the most influential works in the history of mathematics. Although commonly thought to only contain geometry, Euclid's Elements also dealt with other areas of mathematics, i.e. elementary number theory and incommensurable lines and things along that, which if you start putting together, you might form a thing called trigonometry. But we can look back at the Sumerians, and now we found some of these tablets that they wrote off and threw in a box as being, here's a bunch of numbers, looks like somebody's selling grain, or I don't know what it is, chunk. Well, somebody picked through them and they go, this one's a little weird, and they looked at it and everything, and they go, oh, this is some kind of mathematical thing going on, and they're figuring how much it is. I don't know. Well, figure out what it is. I mean, that's your job. Oh, man. And he did it, and he goes, I think this has got to do a whole lot with math thing. And these guys got together on it, and they go, you know, that's trigonometry, but it's not even based on 10 and things. It's based on a 6 in the power of 60, like the Sumerians. And hold on. Oh, wow. Every figure on this thing is correct and lineation. In fact, it's plain trigonometry, and they're figuring out the declination of a planet going across and all these things about it. And it's like, wow. And what is this? Well, these are real extreme old Sumerian tablets. So in some ways they were surely past that point, but I continue. Euclid's Elements is a good example of the rational and academic approach to the study of geometry. As mentioned earlier, there were other thinkers in the classical world who contributed to the study of geometry, some of whom took a different approach to this subject. These thinkers saw symbolic and sacred meanings in geometry, in shapes, in measurements, in everything around them. And when they started describing, whenever I heard and learned about this and the measurements they were and everything, it all of a sudden, like weird, like popcorn started popping up all around me, and it get to the point where you can almost see it in everything, from the point where how far they scooch in a label on things to just all kinds of stuff where people are doing it, and golden numbers and ratios and proportions and all this stuff that came out of it. And it'll drive you crazy unless you realize that you can just let that go. And hey, so as mentioned earlier, there were other thinkers in the classical world who contributed to the study of geometry, some who took a different approach on the subject. They saw symbolic, sacred geometry meanings in everything, and therefore their field of study may be referred to as sacred geometry. A group of these thinkers were the Pythagoreans, who were a school of philosophy that was founded by Pythagoras of Samos. Samos is a Greek or Aegean island over here, right? So what's he got to do with anything, and what's he got to do with the Library of Alexandria? Well, he was the lead guy there and able to get a hold of all kinds of things, and real smart too. Great combination. And he started picking through stuff, and all of a sudden a few things clicked on him, and he went through it, and lo and behold came up with something. But now in doing so, you have to say that he didn't figure that out. He figured out what they were showing representations of. It's not like they were all off a little bit, and once he put it together, he found out this little ratio thing. This was already going on long before. We're seeing shadows of it at Göbekli Tepe, and people way before this time that's here. Today, Pythagoras is known as the best for his Pythagorean Theorem, known also as Pythagoras' Theorem, which states that the sum of the squares on the legs of a right triangle is equal to the square of the hypotenuse on the side opposite to the right angle. And to tell you how that all surrounds me and everything, I'm watching it, I'm doing these things, I'm listening to it, points on the curve, I click on the TV, here's Wizard of Oz, and all of a sudden they give him a heart and they give him a brain, and when they give the dude a brain, he kicks out that theory right at you and everything, and you're like, come on, you know. And sometimes you just, there it is too, well here it is, well there's that, hey, what's the shape of this, what the hell, stop signs are made out of what yield is this shape, this is this shape, and we know that these shapes are associated with these words, and we have them today. It's different than there, but hold on, they do have symbolic meanings with that shape still. And whoa, you can put a bunch of triangles together and make it another way, and you, oh wow, they really seem to like triangles, but out of triangles you can make squares and other, okay, okay. Anyhow, although named after a Greek philosopher, the theorem is actually much older. For instance, several Babylonian clay tablets, they tell you, dating between the 19th and 1600 BC, show some knowledge of the theorem itself. It's also mentioned in the Indian Shulba Sutras, written between 800 and 400 BC. So it looks like maybe he was looking at knowledge from them, and he was like, well, what's this crazy stuff? People are playing around with things, and they've got all this writing about it, and of course it's not writing in his language probably, and he's got to go through this. So it does have that eureka moment at one point, but it's apparently, ooh, here's the thing that no one knows. Well, some people did, huh? And through this revealing of a magic trick, life gets to take an accelerated jump that other people tried to hold back. And all this got lost to the Dark Ages and crap for some reason too, and then it took us 2,000 years really, or 1600, something like that, to get the wheel back going good again. Hey, listen, there are stories where the wheel probably came from longer before than we even talk about, and that there was probably a caveman trying to make a toy for his kid. Yeah, and make his own little mace or his something. And when he rolled it around. But if you have an axle on a wheel but not a second wheel, it rolls around and it makes a circle, doesn't it? Yeah, it's like you're doing donuts. Knock on wood. And so someone might make another wheel, and that kid playing around might stick it on the other side, and then it rolls straight. And it's just a little kid, and out of the mind of babes, somebody look at that and go, oh hell, I got an idea. It's a sweet thought to have if that's the way it went down. So nevertheless, the association with the theorem with Pythagoreans is somewhat apt. They seem to have been particularly interested in triangles. So here's a shot right here, and if I was to tell you that this is an ancient depiction of Jesus praising the sun in the morning, because he's a sun god, and this was his disciples, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, yeah, there it is right there, and that would make sense to you, wouldn't it? But let me tell you, when this was found out and the fact of the way it works, the whole universe and everything, there were people that were worshiping this like crazy. And this is Pythagoreans celebrating the sunrise. This was in 1869, painted by Fyodor Bronnikov. It makes you wonder what Fyodor knew too about things, but he knew that people worshipped like this. And this would have been before your, or was it? It is of little wonder then that the Pythagoreans came up with a triangle-based symbol in the sacred geometry known as the tetrarachs. Now the tetrarachs of the decad are the tetrarachs meaning 4 and decad meaning 10, like decade. This symbol consists of 10 dots arranged in 4 rows, thus forming an equilateral triangle. The tetrarachtes is full of symbolic meaning, not only just being a 4-sided dice that looks exactly like a pyramid. For example, each row of dots is supposed to contain a hidden meaning. The first row of which is a single dot is said to represent the active principle or divine power behind all creation. The second, the passive principle or matter. The third, the world proceeding from the union of the active and passive principles of yin and yang. And the fourth, the 4 liberal arts and sciences that complete the world or see the world's completion through science. Let's go a different way. You got that? This is going to go to a part 2. I thought I'd get it in part 1, but I can't shut up. I feel like I wasted some time and said some mumbling, but let's continue. Naturally, the tetrarachtes was adopted by the Pythagoreans as their symbol. In Raphael's School of Athens, Pythagoras is depicted beside Archimedes, knock on wood, who is shown holding a tablet. The top of the tablet displays Archimedes' principle, whilst its bottom, the tetrarachtes, a nod to the Pythagoreans. I show this in a video, and I tell you that it's Asclepius coming into a temple doing this, and there's these people over here doing that, and there's this one guy here checking out the principle, but there's somebody sneaking a look over his shoulder, and he looks like a scribe writing it down. Same picture. The tetrarachtes, however, has not a purely Pythagorean symbol, and that it had an influence on the sacred geometry of other cultures as well. Listen up, coffee drink, here we go. It has been pointed out, for example, that the 4 letters of the Tetragrammaton, that's the biblical name of God of Israel, may be arranged as a tetrarachtes. For some people right now, a piece in your little puzzle and the little spider comes out and completes a portion of your web. But it also, again, is that 4-sided dice that looks like a bunch of pyramids hooked together, a bunch of triangles hooked up together that make a standing pyramid. It's a 25% chance to hit your number. The symbolic value of shapes. The Pythagoreans, of course, were not the only ones interested in triangles. For instance, the triangle windows are common sight in Christian churches. It is this context, however, that a triangle is taken to represent the Holy Trinity. I hear a bell ringing. As another example, triangles also possess symbolic value in the New Age movement. An upward pointing triangle, for instance, may represent a male energy and the ascent of the spiritual realm, whereas a downward pointing female energy and the descent into the physical world. Not is it ruined or bad, but one is more physical, one is more spiritual. Whenever people had to become more spiritual to reach another level in life, that yin went yang for a while. Now we have gone back, but people have noticed that it's swinging oddly over here, and then the whole thing is getting tipped by people who weren't even part of the yin and yang in the first place, who are rather jealous about the entire thing. But let's continue. If you take an upward triangle and you put it together with a downward triangle, you form the hexagram and the sacred Star of David. We go also with Solomon's seal. But it's left incomplete because you have to have the other part of it and put it on there and go, oh, it comes together. Well, where's that at? So a combination of these triangles creates a hexagram, which may be interpreted as the achievement of harmony. Oh, well, a hexagram is the devil and a pentagram and that one, yeah. Really? Tell me more about this. Weird little painting. And you wonder what painters knew about this stuff, but they're in all kinds of paintings. Michelangelo and people like this were well aware of its ratio. In fact, use it to be able to paint. So you look here, and here's a representation of cubics and boxes and ratios of the earth and shadows and ratios, how it works in a square versus a circle and a rounding of a circle and how that all works. Well, here's a secret. 360 degrees is a circle, but if you take the angles of a square and add them all together, this also is 360 degrees. So you can square a circle. That just makes sense. So is the earth a flat circle? No, that got misinterpreted from people that weren't real part of the ones that actually came up with the whole thing. Hard to believe 2,000 years later we find out we've been taught a misinterpretation of something that comes out as reality in a different place. But as again, I tell you, if you study the things that led into that and what everybody had going before that, you're like, oh shit. So I share shit with you. Apart from the triangle, many of these shapes have been imbibed with symbolic meanings, making them part of sacred geometry. Like the triangle, these shapes may have different meanings attached to each one, ding, depending on the context in which they are produced, ding, and all the symbology that goes within it, ding, kind of like the gods had different aspects and things of each other, ding. And the circle, for example, is found in various cultures around the world and therefore contains multiple meanings. The Pythagoreans, for instance, perceived the circle as a symbol of unity, oneness, and indivisibility. For Zen Buddhists, the circle is a symbol of enlightenment, while the Chinese regard this shape as a symbol of the heavens. In addition, the circle is almost universally as a symbol for the sun. I'm telling you that all of those are the same thing, and the same thing with their symbology that came out of the same thing anyhow. And this big fluff that's been pulled out of it, that changed into all these things that people get all confused about, and it's like, really, it's just this with all of its pomp and circumstance. The cosmos is an incredible, huge thing. It's all around you. It's like the force that penetrates you, it binds you, it keeps you together. It's gravity. It's what holds you together. And if things weren't just the way they are, long ago, one little thing would have gone, and it would have all fallen apart. That's not what's going on here. In modern astronomy, this heavenly body is represented as a circle with a dot in the middle, and I'm telling you, you can find that symbology in the Wayback Machine. Where does that come from? Oh, the Sumerians had it for sure, but they popped up like popcorn, right? So there's these circles, and I guess if you looked at them from space, and they always have stuff in the middle of them that are key points that go off of things, and but that's also a wheel. Well, wheel in the sky keep turning, and there's your sun, and there's another reference to kid songs I grew up with, and Journey, and this winged sun disk, and these things that all go together. And isn't it amazing? All this bullshit these people had developed all out of it, and everybody threw it all away for some bullshit that's a misinterpretation of all that had gone before it in some way, but in other ways it's really a culmination. And that intrigued the hell out of me, and I decided to dig further. Top left hand corner, and we're going to part 2, guys. We'll see you there.